Imagine this. You spent 40 years building a billion-dollar global empire based on three simple things: cold beer, spicy wings, and a very specific kind of customer service. Your brand is so recognizable that it becomes a running joke in movies and TV shows. You're a cultural icon for better or worse. And then, one day, you declare bankruptcy. A debt of $427 million. But the real mistake, the seed of destruction, wasn't a bad investment or a faulty product. It was something much more ironic and, in a way, inevitable. Your main customer base, the men who made your brand a phenomenon, simply got too old. And no one came to replace them. This isn't just a story of how Hooters, the self-proclaimed delightfully tacky restaurant, went from being the king of casual dining to a business school case study on how not to manage a brand. This is a warning about the danger of falling so in love with your own formula that you don't realize the whole world has changed the channel. And believe me, the lesson it leaves behind is worth much more than all the chicken wings they could have ever sold. To understand why Hooters was a phenomenon, we have to hop into my personal DeLorean and travel back to a simpler but infinitely stranger time. The 80s. An era when hair was bigger, power suits had shoulder pads that looked like armor, and cultural sensitivity was, let's say, a work in progress. In that breeding ground, Hooters was born in 1983. Their concept was simple and shamelessly honest. Come for the wings, stay for the view. In a world without social media, where human interaction wasn't filtered through a screen, Hooters offered something that today sounds almost revolutionary. A place for men to go. Men. It was a glorified boys' club. A man cave with a license to sell alcohol and fried food. The concept was simple. Pretty friendly girls in tiny uniforms served you cold beer and mediocre wings. And it worked. It really worked. Hooters didn't sell food. It was selling a fantasy. The fantasy that you were the most popular guy at the bar, the star of your own low-budget sitcom. It was the business equivalent of the movie Top Gun. A little cheesy, shamelessly masculine, and an overwhelming success that defined its era. The genius of Hooters wasn't in its kitchen, but in its deep understanding of the male psychology of that time. It was a safe haven from the complexities of the outside world. Was it problematic? Seen through today's eyes, absolutely. But in the 80s, it was simply a very successful one. But how was this idea, which balanced cleverness with controversy, born? The origin story of Hooters is so unlikely that it seems straight out of a Coen Brothers script. It wasn't conceived in a boardroom by a team of marketing experts with Harvard MBAs. It was founded by 6 entrepreneurs from Clearwater, Florida, who, in their own words, had not the slightest idea how to run a restaurant. In fact, on opening day, April 1st, 1983, they put up a sign saying the business would be closing soon as an April Fool's joke. The greatest irony is that the joke became a prophecy, only it would take 40 years to come true. These 6 founders, known as the Hooters 6, wanted to create a place they themselves would want to go to. A place without pretensions. With bar food and a relaxed, beachy atmosphere. The name Hooters was a deliberate double entendre, referring both to the owl logo and, well, to female anatomy. It was cheeky, it was youthful, and above all, it was memorable. Its initial success was so explosive that in 1984 they sold the franchise rights to a group led by Robert H. Brooks, who saw the brand's true global potential. The original founders kept the rights in the Tampa Bay area, becoming millionaires almost by accident. They created a monster they couldn't control, an empire built on an inside joke among friends. But what exactly was the business trick that made it so addictive and profitable? Let's be brutally honest, no one went to Hooters expecting a Michelin dining experience. The wings were okay, the burgers were passable. The real product was never on the plate. Hooters' business model is a classic case study of what's known as eatertainment, the fusion of eating and entertainment. The customer acquisition cost was relatively low because the value proposition was viral before the term even existed. People talked about it. The real product was the Hooters girls. They were the face, the body, and the soul of the brand. They weren't just waitresses, they were entertainers. Their job, according to the company manual, was to provide a vicarious Southern hospitality experience. They were the engine of revenue. The model was brilliant in its simplicity. The food and drinks had decent margins, but they were just the vehicle to sell the atmosphere. People stayed longer. They ordered another round of beer, another basket of onion rings, all to prolong the experience. It was like going to a casino. The food is cheap or free to keep you at the gaming tables. At Hooters, the wings were the bait to keep you at the table, interacting with the waitresses. This model, where the tangible product is secondary to the intangible experience, is a marketing trick as old as time. But where else have we seen this same strategy taken to the extreme? If you think Hooters was the only one to perfect the art of selling a sexualized atmosphere instead of a product, think about the malls of the early 2000s. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Do you smell that? It's an overwhelming mix of fierce cologne and deafening electronic music. Welcome to Abercrombie & Fitch. At its peak, A&F wasn't selling clothes. It was selling membership to an exclusive club of attractive people. The model was identical to Hooters, but aimed at a teenage audience. Employees or models were hired for their looks. The men worked shirtless. The lighting was dim, like in a nightclub. The product, t-shirts and sweatshirts with a giant logo, was absurdly expensive. But people paid for the status it gave them. You paid $20 for the cotton and $50 for the privilege of saying, "I shop here." Both Hooters and Abercrombie understood that you can put a huge markup on aspiration and the feeling of belonging. Both created temples for their target audience. And both became so incredibly successful that they didn't see their own obsolescence coming. How is it that a model so explicitly based on physical appearance could operate legally for decades? At its peak, in the mid-2000s, Hooters was a money-making machine. It had more than 425 restaurants in 28 countries, generating annual revenues that exceeded $1 billion. It had become a staple of American pop culture. It appeared in movies like Big Daddy with Adam Sandler and was the main sponsor of NASCAR. And it had its own magazine and swimsuit calendar. It was more than just a restaurant. It was a lifestyle brand. But this massive success had a dangerous side effect: complacency. The brand stopped innovating. The menu barely changed in 30 years. The decor in the restaurants, with its wood paneling and neon lights, stayed frozen in 1985. While the world moved forward, Hooters became a time capsule. It was like that uncle who keeps telling the same jokes from his college days, not realizing that no one laughs anymore. The problem is that while Hooters was resting on its laurels, someone was taking notes, and that someone was about to hack their formula and make it better. Every story of a sleeping giant needs a nimble, hungry challenger. For Hooters, that challenger was Twin Peaks. Founded in 2005, Twin Peaks called itself Hooters on steroids. The founder, Randy DeWitt, basically photocopied the Hooters model and gave it a 21st century upgrade. The strategy was simple: identify every weakness of Hooters and turn it into a strength. Are Hooters wings mediocre? Twin Peaks promised food made from scratch. Is Hooters beer just standard? Twin Peaks served it at 29 degrees Fahrenheit, about minus 1.6 degrees Celsius. A temperature so cold, it became their main selling point. Is the Hooters uniform outdated? The Twin Peaks girls wore a more suggestive, sexy lumberjack outfit, with tied plaid tops and short shorts. It was Hooters 2.0. They aggressively stole market share, often opening locations right next to a Hooters. It was the equivalent of what Facebook did to MySpace, taking the core idea and executing it in a more modern and appealing way for today's audience. But if Hooters had a secret weapon, it was their legal defense. How did they manage to get away with it for so long? The million-dollar question. How was it that Hooters could legally hire only women as waitresses without being sued into bankruptcy for gender discrimination? The answer lies in 3 magic letters: BFOQ. This stands for Bona Fide Occupational Qualification, or Good Faith Occupational Requirement. It's an exception in the Civil Rights Act that allows discrimination based on sex, religion, or nationality, if it's considered reasonably necessary for the normal operation of that particular business or enterprise. Hooters brilliantly argued that their waitresses were not just servers, they were entertainers. They claimed that being a woman was an essential part of the job. Just like being a woman is a requirement to play the role of Wonder Woman in a movie. And for a long time, the courts agreed. This legal loophole was the moat that protected their castle for decades. It allowed them to build a multi-million-dollar brand on a foundation that, in any other industry, would have been illegal. But a moat only protects you if the outside world doesn't change. And what happens when cultural change starts to tear down your walls? Hooters' biggest enemy wasn't Twin Peaks, it was inertia. The brand found itself trapped in what is known as the innovator's dilemma. They were so profitable doing what they had always done that any change seemed like too big a risk. They were afraid of alienating their loyal customer base, a demographic that was getting older and smaller. Modernizing the menu, the uniforms, or the decor could drive away the purists. So they did nothing. This is the economy of fear. The fear of change is stronger than the promise of growth. Hooters became a hostage to its own past success. They were like a 70s rock band that refuses to play new songs because the audience only wants to hear Stairway to Heaven once again. The problem is that the audience gets older and eventually stops going to concerts. Meanwhile, new generations with different tastes and, crucially, different values were growing up. And those new generations were not only uninterested in Hooters, they started to see it as a problem. In 2003, in a desperate branding move that should be studied in business schools as an example of what not to do, Hooters launched Hooters Air. The CEO, Robert Brooks, bought a small bankrupt airline for a considerable sum and renamed it. The idea was that the planes, painted with the owl logo, would serve as flying billboards. On every flight, 2 Hooters girls, dressed in their uniforms, would assist the professional flight attendants, who wore more conservative uniforms, and organized trivia games. It was a colossal failure. It turns out that people choose an airline for its safety, punctuality, and price, not for the promise of playing bingo with a waitress at 30,000 feet. The Hooters brand, associated with beer, wings, and flirting, didn't exactly inspire confidence in aeronautical engineering. After 3 years of massive losses, Hooters Air shut down in 2006, with a direct loss of more than $40 million. But the real cost was much greater. It was the physical manifestation of a brand that had completely lost its way. If Hooters Air was the most spectacular mistake, the attempt to rebrand as Hoots in 2017 was the saddest. They created a fast casual version, with a more limited menu, and crucially, with both male and female employees dressed in regular uniforms. It was an attempt to appease an audience that never cared about them. And the result was a soulless concept that quickly failed. What remains for a fallen icon in the modern world? The future is bleak. To survive, they would need such a radical reinvention that they would probably stop being Hooters. They would have to change the name, the concept, and the business model. What is left of a brand if you take away everything that made it famous in the first place? It's a trap that seems impossible to escape. They are doomed to slowly shrink, becoming a nostalgic curiosity, a museum of a bygone era. And so we return to the beginning, to the $427 million mistake. Hooters Air was not the cause of Hooters' downfall. It was the most visible symptom of a disease that had been brewing for years: arrogance and the inability to adapt. The 6 founders created Hooters as a joke, a place that made fun of itself, but somewhere along the way, the corporation that took over their idea started taking the joke way too seriously. They believed their formula was immortal. The big lesson from Hooters is a warning for any brand, business, or creator. The world won't stop changing just because you feel comfortable. What made you successful yesterday could become your biggest weakness tomorrow. Hooters built an empire on an 80s fantasy, but forgot to wake up when the 21st century alarm went off. And now they're paying the price. Do you think Hooters can reinvent itself somehow, or is it a lost cause? If you enjoyed this analysis, you might also be interested in why smartwatches are a scam. I promise it will leave you shocked.